The weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-host, Wayne and Hannah. How's it going, guys?
Wait, guys, you know what's happening right now?
No, time stopped like 9 months ago. I have no idea what's happening.
This is our last podcast before the election takes place. So this is our last moment where we can truly be hopeful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but this is it.
That just sounded more dire than I think you meant it to be. I mean, I think you're hoping we can be hopeful next week.
I don't know. This is like our moment. This is like the eye of the storm.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know.
So our moment of hope.
If we're not on next week, you'll know what happened.
The heat death of the universe is what happened. which it's 2020. I'm not ruling that out. It's not.
It could be there. Yep.
And now, oh God, see, you just killed any possibility for Snappy Patter to start the show with.
That's me. I kill the mood. I'm great at parties.
Hey, it is the last episode. I guess the way this show drops, assuming you're in America, that means for the listener, it's Monday and election day is tomorrow.
Yeah. So go vote.
Go vote.
For the love of God.
Yeah.
Yes. Go vote, please. All right. So on that cheery note, Wayne, what are we doing today?
Well, I think it's appropriate because we've been talking with genre and horror. It's Halloween month and all that stuff. So we've had a spate of episodes dealing with that. And a longtime listener and longtime friend of mine I have probably Facebook conversation months ago. I think he made a suggestion and I liked it. And then I was lazy and never wrote up a call for comments for months on end. But it's the idea of, last week we talked about horror movies and what makes a horror movie and what the genre is and the difference between that suspense and whatever. And there's this whole other realm of movies that he suggested. Movies, the example he gave was Deliverance. Like, is that a horror movie? Because we have characters being stalked and terrorized, and it's not something we typically think of as a horror film.
Yes, it is. So that's the end of the show. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, well, and that's it. And that one in particular has certainly been, it has been qualified in that category. But I think there's a lot of other things that are like that. So we want to talk about the horror of reality is what we called the episode, which, given this is the day before the election, might be very appropriate. So our first guest is my friend Ted, who suggested the thing. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Hi guys.
Hey, how's it? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I've known Ted for 20 plus years. We share hobbies of we share hobbies of comics. I think is probably where I first met you. But then there's also the local music scene. Ted's been in a ton of local bands and currently working in movie, TV production stuff. So tell us all about yourself, Ted.
I don't even know where to start. Yeah, I think I've been just about everything I can be. I've been graphic designer / art director for many, 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 many years. I was in a couple of metal bands and got signed to records, Dream Death and Eviction. Then I retired from that and became a father I still a father, but
for 2 years, then I gave it up.
I dabbled in mountain climbing for a couple years, and then I got a call to be an extra on a TV show filming in Pittsburgh about 6 years ago. And I had nothing else to do that summer because I was freelance. I was graphic design, but I was freelancing. So I was like, yeah, what the hell? Sure. Sounds like something to do. And walked onto the set and absolutely fell head over heels in love with the whole thing. I've always loved movies. I love movies. I love TV. Always been fascinated by everything. I never had any interest in being in the creative side of it. My one band Pilsner, we donated a couple songs to an indie movie, like a Tarantino knockoff kind of director up in Boston. That's like the closest I came to it. I had a friend that's an assistant director. I had a friend that was in props, but really I never had any interest. And I actually I was an extra on Dark Knight's shot in Pittsburgh just because, in one scene in the stadium, just because I'm a huge Batman fan. So I was like, okay, this is my only chance I'll ever have to get in a Batman movie. Sure, I'll go do that.
Ted and I sat together in the stadium when Bane blew it up, and and there's a couple of stills. If you pause the film just right, there's like 2 or 3 pixels that we're pretty sure are us. And I have a photo of that, and I'm going to share it. We'll put it in the show notes as soon as I can find it here.
I wore blue back here because we were supposed to wear black and gold, and I don't like the Steelers, so I wasn't going to wear black and gold. So I wore and this was like a jacket, And
this was like the hottest, most humid day in August possible, and we were filming a winter scene.
Yeah. And I had my oldest daughter with me too, and that was it though. I mean, that was it. I never thought anything more about it again. And then skip ahead a couple more years, and I ended up being this extra. And then at the end of the episode or end of the series, I got a SAG card. I did some stunt work, and then that just really led into a whole new world that I never had before. There we are. I never had, I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. And then I spent some time on Gotham, and I did an episode of Daredevil. Typically because of the way I look, I play thugs, tough guys, junkies, bikers, brawlers. I'm a real sweetheart, but that's what anyway. The TV show that was filming here in town, just for the record, was The Outsiders, which ran 2 seasons? 2 seasons, WGN, 2 seasons. We got canceled.
And I think my favorite scene in it was there was a party going on out in the woods, and you were playing a washtub bass, which cracked me up because you're a bass player in metal bands, and I just that I thought was great.
Yeah, that's exactly what, I was supposed to be this real tough guy on the show, but they're like, but you're also going to be this musician for our mountain band. I'm like, all right, whatever. So everybody in that band really played instruments. That was the really funny thing. They wanted. That's really neat. Yeah, so everybody was like, it was great, and that's a very iconic picture, I should say. It's like I see that people keep sharing that with me. But we got canceled 4 weeks before we were supposed to start shooting season 3, and so I just kept going from there. I was like, well, I don't have to. I don't want to go back to my old life at the art studio and being an art director. So I was like, I can do this, and so far for going on 6 years, seems to be doing all right. I mean, I worked on Wonder Woman, Bad Boys 3, a multitude of TV shows. With the exception of my kids being born, I'm probably leading my best life right now. I don't think I've ever been this happy in a long time. So,
very cool. Nice.
And it's kind of cool because it brought me back. It really brought me back to movies, something I took for granted that we've always had our entire life. I watch older movies now that I overly appreciate more than I ever did in the past, which I really enjoy.
I'm going to steal your segue here because, speaking of taking something for granted, we have Michael Chemers back again, too.
Nice segue.
Just nice segue, Mav.
Hey, Mav.
Oh, my God.
The truth is 2 weeks in a row, he just never left. We just muted his mic and kept going. Yeah.
I've been here since 1986. I can't get out of this room. I can't figure out how to leave.
So you're saying that you've been here longer than I've been alive?
Yes.
That's rub it in, why would you do that?
Thanks for bringing that up. That's great.
Because she's a blast
wee little child.
Remember? Yeah. So anyway, our topic. What's up with that?
Wait, you're not going to introduce me? Like, you're not going to tell people who I am and what I do?
You were here last week. Who are you, Mike?
Okay. If you want to know who I am, just listen to last week's show when I got a nice introduction.
He's here to talk about Noel Carroll with me.
Woo!
Okay, you are a professor of dramaturgy at
UC Santa Cruz.
UC Santa Cruz. Okay.
Yeah. It's true that my life compared to Ted's is really boring. I've just been a professor for the past 20 years.
But anyway, so this is a weird one for me because I actually don't know much in this space. As was discussed, briefly on last week's show about horror. I'm not sure because I'm not a big horror movie buff. I like some of them. I'll probably like more of the ones that we mentioned today than I do of what people classically consider horror. I think Deliverance is a great movie. I think it's awesome. But so I'm curious as to see where this conversation is going to go.
Yeah, I watched that again this summer after Ted mentioned it, and I hadn't seen it in years. I remember seeing that movie on ABC's Movie of the Week when I was 12 or 13 years old, and I wonder what I saw because with editing and that sort of thing. Boy, there's a lot of that movie that they couldn't have shown on TV.
No, there's a lot that they couldn't show.
Yeah, and I think at that age, a lot of it would have gotten over my head anyway. But I do really wonder what that cut looked like because there's I'm sure that like a lot of movies of the week they did alternate cuts. You'll see scenes in stuff that was shown for TV that never makes it to the DVD.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole not to get off subject, but if the movie Car Wash is what always reminds me. There's a whole subplot that's on the TV version that doesn't exist on the DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah, they shot it. Yeah, and it wasn't in the theatrical cut. Yeah, Car Wash has an entire separate story that is only on the TV cut. Yeah,
I never knew that.
Yeah, the other one that crosses my mind with that is I remember seeing Cabaret on TV as a kid, and I'm assuming all I saw was the musical numbers. Because the rest of that movie is homosexuality and abortion. So it had to have been just an hour and a half of dancing and singing, and that was it. But anyway, in watching again, it did strike me. I mean, a lot of the hallmarks of the horror film is there, but it's not something I ever thought of in that way. That final scene, I've been reading some stuff online since watching it again, and since we talked about this episode, that final scene where Jon Voight wakes up and he has the nightmare, and we see the hand rising out of the water. Like that's kind of classic horror imagery. One of the articles I wrote made a point saying that was like the first time that image appeared, that type of image, which I have a tough time believing, and he didn't cite any sources, so take that for what you will. I mean, that's sort of a classic horror scene, that the dead hand rising and coming back. Now, in this, it was a dream, not a reality, but that the movie closing with that sense of unease and uncertainty and horror for what they had done for Jon Voight, I think certainly qualifies the movie. But prior to that, they're being stalked through the woods. They're being chased, and that's sort of a classic horror trope. I mean, that's that idea, the most dangerous game. They are being hunted. And it's the same thing with Jon Voight when he goes to take the shot. At towards the end there, he takes a shot at the man with the rifle. He has the same reaction when he tried to shoot the deer earlier. He's really shaking, and I mean that happens in horror movies where you go to kill your the bad guy or the killer or whatever, and you can't do it for whatever reason. The guy just wreaked havoc on all your friends, but yet you're still holding back because you can't do it. It's that you can't unbalance your core being to be that aggressive or anything, and he can't do it, and it backfires on him. He falls on his arrow. Ultimately, he does shoot him, but
Mm-hmm.
I heard the same thing about the hand coming up too. That they do point at Deliverance as being the first time that was used. Where the ending happened. Oh, big sigh of relief. He comes home, and then boom, you get hit. Same thing with Carrie. Big sigh of relief. Hand comes up. End of story. And that, I guess that's what we're talking about is the things that qualify as horror. I mean, so much of that people automatically think of
slasher
monsters and the supernatural and the slasher movies and whatnot. But there's this whole other. Stephen King is known as a horror author, but Cujo is just a big dog. Yeah, Christine's a car. Yeah, So I guess what I'm looking for here is what other movies are there? What, not just movies, books, TV, whatever, that kind of fall in that category of things that we don't normally think of. This probably won't be shown during Halloween on AMC's Horror Month. What kind of stuff fits in that category?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that something like Silence of the Lambs could qualify. Like I think more people think of it as a thriller, as a crime movie. But it's actually I go on about my ambivalence toward what we call horror because a lot of horror movies don't scare me. But Silence of the Lambs is really scary because you can imagine it to be real because it has like a valence of reality about it. I mean, like in some ways, slasher movies have a bit of a valence of reality to it because like I get it. Like Mike Myers is the literal boogeyman and he doesn't seem to ever die. But like, technically someone could be stalking you, staring at you, creeping upon you. Like we're like that is technically true. And like it doesn't happen. Like, we pay attention to these things in the news when they happen because it's unusual and the whole it bleeds, it leads thing. But, sometimes like people are kidnapped. There are serial killers. I mean, they are not portrayed in the way that they actually are, usually in fiction. But, like it could happen. And the devil.
And Michael Myers and Jason, in the first movies of those franchises, were just dudes. They weren't supernatural beings.
Yeah, that happens later.
Yeah, that's something that happens later as they needed to up the ante on that. But for my money, the early ones are more frightening and more real. I mean, yeah, a lot of the horror films, like I find things like Chucky, that sort of thing, just laughable. That stuff doesn't scare me. I just find it kind of ridiculous.
That takes us back to last week's discussion about how the things that make us horrified and the things that make us laugh are actually really similar.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, Silence of the Lambs I find genuinely disturbing. We mentioned Midsummer last week as well, and same thing. Like that's not a classic horror film, but maybe it is.
Well, I think, what you're talking about is the presence of the supernatural, right? And monsters or things like that. And we can say, well, Hannibal Lecter's a monster. And we could make an argument about that, which I don't know if Hannibal Lecter is or isn't a monster, but I think it would be an interesting discussion that would lead us to some interesting conclusions. But I think that one of the problems with genre classifications, and you guys know me, I always want to push back against genre classifications. I think they are anti-creative, right? They're marketing tools, as Math pointed out last time, so that we can sell people, I like horror movies. So I'm going to go to this show that's marketed as a horror movie, but from another angle, it's a comedy movie or it's something else, right? So there are many different kinds of fear, right? And there's a difference between terror, which is the kind of feeling you feel when you feel like, there's an immediate threat to you, versus horror, which is more of a aesthetic reaction to stimulus that makes you wonder if your understanding of reality is not what you thought it was, right? That's how it's usually described, horror, as opposed to fear or fright or terror, right?
Yeah. Well, Michael, since you bring up an interesting discussion on whether or not Hannibal Lecter is a monster, I'd like to go to Noel Carroll's article that we cited last week on humor and horror. Yeah.
We should bring Noel on the show.
I'm sure he would love to do that. But he, part of how he defines horror is the idea of the monster as like an archetypal character. And he says, quote, the most effective way of characterizing such monsters is to say that they are beings whose existence science denies. Jaws, which like we have talked about in this context as maybe being like a reality horror, because like, there are real shark attacks and it's not like Godzilla. Jaws is a monster, to quote Carroll again, because it appears to possess self-consciousness. On Hannibal Lecter, it merely requires the recognition that the psycho killers one encounters in the relevant popular fictions are not really the sort countenanced by contemporary psychology. So like, because these monsters, be they like animal or human, don't fit into what science and facts tells us, Carroll argues basically they're actually a certain other kind of supernatural, even if they seem more realistic on first glance.
See, I never saw the shark in Jaws as a monster, although I do consider Jaws a horror movie because it does have all the elements. Again, you're being stalked. You can't see the antagonist. But I don't know, because it's maybe because the shark is not supernatural or a mythic monster. I never made that connection, which is interesting. But it is, it's a terror movie. I mean, and Jaws is a scary movie. Friday the 13th is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. They're not scary movies. The Saw movies, I can't even watch them. They don't scare me. They make me uneasy because I don't really care. I don't like mutilation. I want to be scared. Mm-hmm. Actually, I like the suspense of being hunted, like in Deliverance or Jaws, or even like I was just trying to think of movies that I consider horror movies that aren't typical horror movies, and like I saw like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where it's like it makes you uneasy. For the better part, most of Rosemary's Baby is a horror movie. At the end, you only see you only really get to the supernatural thing at the end. You feel this tension and uneasiness, and like that you want that cold chill up your spine because you think somebody's following you. To me, that's horror. The slasher stuff I don't consider. I mean, Aliens is horror. Aliens movie is a horror movie. It's a horror movie in space, flat out.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with your central point there, Ted. I think that they're to distinguish between those different types of experiences, right? The first Hannibal movie, I think it was just called Silence of the Lambs, right? Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm. The first one that anybody saw, Manhunters.
Yeah.
The first one that anybody saw, Silence of the Lambs. The moment that you find out that Buffalo Bill, the serial killer, is killing women in order to make himself a flesh suit so that he can turn into a woman, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, spoilers. That is horrific, right? That's not terrifying because it's not happening to me, right? It's not a jump scare like Ted is saying. It's not like a slasher thing. It's horrifying. It's like, oh my God, I don't know what the universe is. I'm shocked. Yeah. I'm astonished. And so to me, it's like that's, even though there aren't any quote unquote monsters in that movie, it's still quite horrifying.
Right. And that and Silence of the Lambs, like Hannah said earlier, it borders on reality.
Right.
That, it did happen at Dean. It happened. That there are people out there that could possibly do that and probably are doing that.
Right.
So yeah, it blends it into a little bit more of a that grounds it in a little bit more reality. You're right.
In real life, we had, Jeffrey Dahmer grew up, an hour and a half from where I'm sitting.
Mm-hmm. I just shot a Netflix show in January, a quarter of a mile up from the Buffalo Bill's house.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And I'm
so so just the reality of that, and you watch. If anybody's seen, this is a plug for a graphic novel and a movie. The book, My Friend Dahmer.
I was actually going to ask you, is that a horror film? I love that film. We saw the premiere. You and I. The guy who wrote it. Yeah,
John Backdorf is the artist, and he came in. Phantom helped sponsor the movie, the premiere of it here, and the movie was filmed. I mean, if you watch the movie, the scenes taking place in Dahmer's house, that's actually his house. Mm-hmm. They filmed all of that on specific location as much as they possibly could of the places this actually happened. And it's weird. I mean, for those who don't know, it's the story. John Backdorf was in high school with Jeffrey Dahmer. And My Friend Dahmer is the story of him knowing him during this time and telling the anecdotes of the friendship. Now, Dahmer was a weird dude that they all kind of made fun of, and he was awkward and whatever, but he was still a part of their circle. And he tells that story of knowing this weird guy in high school, but he tells it after the fact. We all know what Jeffrey Dahmer became. And in the book, there was this really, to me, the chilling moments were when he was putting together, his friend's driving down the road and sees Dahmer walking along the highway, and he stops to give him a ride, and Dahmer turns him down, and he moves on. And at the time, it's just like, okay, Jeff didn't want to ride. And if you look at the timeline, he was walking home from his first kill. Mm-hmm. And I find that really fucking chilling, because that's absolute reality. And this was taking place. They were a year older than me, so it was taking place, during my junior year of high school, an hour and a half from where I grew up, which was also at a time of satanic panic. I remember in the news at that time, they had found some like animal sacrifices and that sort of thing in the woods in Ohio. And oh my God, is this a satanic cult? And I can now put that timeline together and no, they found some of Dahmer's shit in the woods. Mm-hmm. That's what I heard about then. That you making skin suits, killing people and eating them and putting them in your refrigerator. This shit happens in real life.
That, Wayne, is really interesting because what you just brought up was the notion that, we're talking about, can it be horror without a monster, without some sort of supernatural entity? And then what you were saying is that the fact that this is real, that it has real world reference, actually makes it more horrifying.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you see the film, My Friend Dahmer, it mostly doesn't lean into any of the classic horror tropes. It's not gory. It's, and it's really good. Everyone should watch it. But it is
the graphic novel.
Yes. But it is very much a psychological. This works because we're looking at the development of this broken man who was one of the most notorious serial killers that the United States has ever produced.
Yeah, and seeing that, okay, birth of a monster, is that going too far to say that? Do we qualify Dahmer as a monster or just a broken human being?
Well, we generally, in my work, I generally try to keep monsters to cultural manifestations, right? So if there actually were a werewolf walking across campus looking for a bite to eat, I'm like, that's not my problem, right? I teach a class on monsters, but if one actually shows up, that's biology's problem, right? I'm interested in the way that monsters appear in cultural products, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that Jeffrey Dahmer was a real person, or that or Charlie Manson, right? When we turn them into characters in a movie or a graphic novel, then they can become monsters, right? But they're not on their own. They're actually humans born of human parents, which, as you guys point out, is even worse.
Well, and I think we use that term monster in those cases in an effort to distance them from humanity because we don't want to associate that with humanity.
Exactly. And Dahmer takes it up a level too. It's like, there's serial killers. Not all serial killers eat their prey. It's like, so you've mega-sized your monsterism. It's like, okay, you're bad enough as you are now. But now you're going to do this. So now you're really like, that's like, it just up the level. It's like, okay.
And the book and the movie both, I think, successfully humanize him as well. And not in a positive way. It's not an excuse for him at all. We all knew this kid in high school. Every high school has that awkward, weird loner that everybody makes fun of. And sometimes a group of people kind of adopt them as a sidekick. But most of them don't go on to what Dahmer did. But there is that humanizing effort of, we all knew this kid.
I think I was that kid, actually.
Well, you're more.
Well, I know. I just worry about using the term monster to describe real people, because that's also a term that people use to dehumanize people a lot when they disagree with them. It also, I think, maybe sometimes gets collapsed into
I totally agree with you, Hannah. I think this is a big part of my own research, right? Where when we call someone a monster, then it means they're not human, and we don't have to deal with the humanity of what they've done, right? Mm-hmm. When I look at someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, what I have to recognize, and this is probably the most horrifying thing, is that he's a human being and he was capable of this. I'm a human being, and it means under some circumstances, hopefully, that I will never face, I too could be capable of that. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, and that using that term to dehumanize people, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, and my work with Holocaust narratives and that sort of thing, of the dehumanization of the Jews that took place under the Nazi regime, and prior to that as well, anti-Semitism in general. But how many pieces of propaganda have we seen that portray Jewish people as essentially monsters? They
absolutely.
have horns, all this stuff, and it is part of an ongoing propaganda to dehumanize those that we wish not to think of as human.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that all goes back to the topic too, because these are the movies that we're supposed to be, that we talk about that they're not typical horror movies in our eyes, and and that relates to this. It's like, well, these are not typical normal people, so that makes it scary. And that's why the movies, and TV, it's like when you don't understand. It's easy to understand, a class, later on, a Freddy or a Michael Myers, the later stuff, because they've made them to be more bigger than they are and unkillable and all that stuff. But when it's an initial, I'm trying to think of the right word I want to use, when you can't say that's a bad guy, that's a monster, that's the creature, it puts you off because you don't know. And that's why Norman Bates in Psycho was so successful. That's a horror movie. Mm-hmm. He's a monster. He's a monster, but he's a human monster. He could be. He's just. You don't know. You don't know up until the point where you know that it's him. Mm-hmm. That's the suspense. That's where it's like, well, is this? And there's a lot of movies that are like that, where that classic monster, and then you spend the whole movie, you spend the next hour and a half avoiding the monster.
Mm-hmm. No. I think one of the ongoing themes in the entire Walking Dead world, whether it's the comics or the TV series or whatever, is there are zombies. There are flesh-eating walkers. They're not zombies in that world. There are flesh-eating monsters out there, but they're really not the monsters in this world. I mean, once beyond the initial survival of that scenario, the stuff they keep running into are characters like the Governor and Negan and the Whisperers and these people who are they are the bigger threat to survival in this world. You at this point in the series, after 2 or 3 years, if you're still alive, you know how to deal with zombies.
I've never seen one single episode of this show.
Me neither, actually.
Yeah, and I think zombies are stupid.
Yeah, I am a fan of it for various reasons. Because for me, it's all about the characters. It's not about the zombies and the horror. It's the character arcs. But that has definitely been the theme of that. Is it's not the zombies that is the horror in this world. It is the other people, and in these cases, other people who are simply trying to survive this world as well. A point that they make many times over is, we come into it through this one group, Rick Grimes, the main character. We come into it through Rick's group and we follow their journey. So we think of them as the heroes, and they keep encountering other groups of people that we view as the bad guys. But the point is there that if we had started the narrative with that other group of people, Rick's group would be the bad guys because everybody's just doing what they're doing to survive.
That's a good point. Yeah. I'm familiar. I have a lot of friends that work on the show. Mm-hmm. So I'm familiar with it, but I think you're right. And that's why they're doing that spinoff that was shooting in Richmond. Whatever it's called. This is it from another angle. So what you've grown accustomed to might not be the norm in this one. So in the horrors of the month, whatever that you're so used to in The Walking Dead, you might not be so used to in the new series or even Fear the Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm. There's so many spin-offs of this series now. Fear the Walking Dead, Life of the Walking Dead, Son of the Walking Dead CSI, Walking Dead, The Great British Walking Dead Bake Off. There's just so many.
Strolling Dead, Lounging Dead.
Lounging Dead.
Yeah, I can do that. I could tell you guys all off the interview. I could tell you some very interesting stories about those shows.
You would watch the Great Walking Dead Bake Off, wouldn't you?
Oh, no, I totally would.
The only zombie movies I actually enjoy is the first Night of the Living Dead and Shaun of the Dead. Other than that, I don't care. Zombieland. They're great. I got three movies in my catalog.
The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones are similar in that they went on for too long and simultaneously not long enough. Destroyed all their good female character storylines. Turned out to be nihilistic instead of actually semi-optimistic like their source material. And also just annoyed me after 2 seasons. So that no more chances, no more spinoffs. I'm done.
Don't sugarcoat it, Hannah. Tell us how you really feel.
I mean, Michael, you were on for the Game of Thrones episode.
I was.
My opinion has only grown stronger.
Yeah.
So is mine. So is mine. I'm so disappointed. I'm still. What is it? It's 2020, and it's that ending to that show was so bad. It's amazing it didn't happen in 2020.
Yes. You know what? That was actually a harbinger of things to come.
That's what it was.
Yep. We should have known. But thank you.
What was that?
Nice.
Yeah. I hadn't used the soundboard in a while.
Thanks for that.
Oh, well, whenever Wayne pops into a confessional,
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we then?
What do you guys think? Do you guys have any other movies that you consider, that are horror but not typically horror? I cited Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is great. It's suspenseful. It's got every element of a great horror movie.
Well, one we mentioned on our Cuties episode a month ago, the Jodie Foster thing with the little girl at the end of the lane. Same thing.
Yeah.
That definitely has that feel to it.
Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, another Bette Davis movie where it's just like it's a psychological thriller, but yet it's got a lot of it's gothic, southern, it's got murder, and again it's like maybe it's a stretch on this one, but it's still there. Like I said, I cited Alien. Alien, the first Alien movie is a horror movie. It's a horror movie in space. The tagline is "No one can hear you scream." Pretty much says, "Hey, you're going to scream. This is a scary movie."
Well, so for me, I mean, one of the questions, and I'm like what Michael said, I use genre. I think of genre as a very, very loose. It's a marketing ploy, like I said last week. But one of the things I'm thinking of is like, as much as I don't particularly love horror movies, I like a lot of Hitchcock stuff that becomes questionable, right? Like so as far as horror movies, I'd say The Birds is absolutely a horror movie, and I love it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it's a horror movie.
But my favorite Hitchcock movie is probably Notorious. And it's a suspense thriller. It's like a spy, like it's not a horror movie in the same way. It's not even suspense in the way that that you would talk of I don't know, of like Silence of the Lambs or something like that. The Notorious is a psychological thriller in Hitchcock's vein that uses a lot of the same elements. Rear Window, same thing, right? What else does Hitchcock? Vertigo, more or less.
I mean, I would say that Vertigo is bordering on horror in terms of psychological thriller. Like guy finds himself going mad in the same way that something like maybe a gothic novel like Rebecca, a woman finds herself going mad because her husband's a dick. Which,
well, even
way,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, by the way, if you're thinking about watching the Netflix's new Rebecca, don't. It's real bad. The cast tries their hardest, but they can't save poor writing, a very bad tone, and the worst directing I've seen in a long time.
Well, see, but I was thinking, like, even like for the prototypical horror, right? Frankenstein, the actual novel, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? Is it? I mean, it's not horror by any modern imagining of how we use that term, right? Like that's like to read. I mean, I wouldn't think to read Frankenstein. You're not reading Frankenstein to be scared. You're reading Frankenstein to engage in the.
You're reading Frankenstein because you were assigned Frankenstein. I'm sorry, that was just a light joke.
I like Frankenstein.
I do too.
But you're reading it to. I think I don't think you're reading it to be scared, like you're not reading Frankenstein to be scared the way you're scared of Freddy Krueger or any of the other monsters that we say owe their genesis to Frankenstein. You're reading Frankenstein to witness the downfall of man and psyche and what does it mean to play God.
I'm gonna push back on you. I disagree. I never disagree with you, Mav, because you're the head of the snake, and I'm scared of you. So.
Oh Lord.
But side joke. But I think Frankenstein, if you really read it, if you're really willing to go there, it's quite scary. I think there are some really beautiful moments in there that are genuinely scare me.
Mary Shelley even was like, I like had these terrible visions and this is scary. And also like Frankenstein is being like stalked by the creature for like a while, and he's creeping up on like his victims, and like there is definitely like a bit of a serial killer bit going on and some framing going on, and I mean like they might appear differently and like
I just don't think those are the interesting parts.
Well, okay, I mean that's
maybe it's me.
Opinion.
Yeah, maybe it's me. Yeah, maybe it's me.
I mean, I think actually we should acknowledge, because we've had a rotating panel of people these past 2 episodes where we talk about like what scares us, and I think that like horror and what we're afraid of is very subjective. For instance, some people keep pets as snakes, and the only time the Bake Off has ever frightened me, like truly frightened me, is when Rosie the vet, who is a delightful human, has her pet pythons on film. And like there was a snake outside my house several months ago, and I literally wouldn't go outside for a week. So that was okay because there was a pandemic on. So I could be weird about it, but like, like there was a giant snake skin in my yard, and that like scared me that much. Meanwhile, all of you are laughing at me. Like, horror is subjective. I think we should acknowledge that. You're laughing at me. It's fine.
I was thinking about this film that I saw recently called Kingdom of the Spiders. I'd seen this in the 80s. I mean, you guys have got to know this film. It was one of William Shatner's worst offerings. He plays a doctor, a horse doctor in a small town in Arizona or someplace, and they're being attacked by spiders. Not giant spiders, normal spiders. It's just a whole bunch of
just a lot of them.
Just a lot of them. A whole bunch of ordinary tarantulas that wouldn't, in normal circumstances, harm a fly. And I'm sitting here going like, I hate spiders. I feel the way about spiders that you feel about snakes, Hannah. And even this movie couldn't scare me. It was so stupid, you know.
Like an Indiana Jones kind of snake pit moment.
Yeah. But, you know, there was a film, there's a Bela Lugosi film in 1941. I saw this thinking that it was a monster movie, but it's not. It's called Invisible Ghost.
Oh, The Invisible Ghost is great.
Yeah, right? And I thought that was really scary and horrific, even though there aren't any monsters in it.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's scary. It's a scary movie.
Yeah. But it's all psychological. It's all psychological horror. It's not, there's no terror.
I would rather be scared than
frightened or startled.
Not even that. I'd rather be scared than terrified. You know, like I don't want to see, like I said earlier, I don't want to see a Saw. I don't want to see. I don't care about any. I don't like mutilation. I don't like the mutilation movies. I don't find them scary. I find them disturbing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ted.
I find them, you know, I just don't find them that they bring anything. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't know. Maybe it's the pacifist in me. I just don't want to see anybody hurt. But I do like being scared. I like being on jump. I like I like that moment where you lean too far back in your chair. You know, and that's what I want, and that's what I like about a good horror movie or a non-traditional horror movie is that you're going to surprise me. You know, even watching Deliverance, you know, I still there was an element where it still kept me on edge, even though I've seen the movie multiple times, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think like what scares us, because I varies because I can sit through like Sweeney Todd, Stoneface as people like bleed out buckets of blood or any of the slasher movies. But as soon as Rosemary ate the obviously drugged dessert in Rosemary's Baby, had to turn it off. Like I cannot finish it, because that is just so upsetting to me because I know what's going to happen. Like it's like Handmaid's Tale. I can't watch the Handmaid's Tale because it is just frightening and disturbing, and it feels extremely real in certain ways, even though it's not.
My oldest daughter, she loves the first Halloween movie. She loves The Exorcist. Like she loves them. They're her favorite, Halloween movies all the time. She has not, to this day, she's 24. She has, to this day, never sat through Rosemary's Baby all the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because she can't. It's too much for her. She's like, I'm too freaked out. I'm too scared. I can't do it. It literally scares her. So I'm like, wow, the freaking Exorcist doesn't scare you? Because it scared the shit out of me.
I think that's different, right? Because there's not tangible. Right. Yes. There's a suspension of disbelief that you're buying into an Exorcist. You're buying into Chucky movies, like those things, right? Like Friday the 13th. This is not real. It's scary because of the visceral reaction to scariness, as opposed to things that are scary because they're upsetting in a way that this could happen to me and I am uncomfortable with.
Baby, you don't know. I mean, until the very end, like the very, very last scene, you don't know. You don't know if she's freaking crazy. You don't know. It's like, so you're always guessing. Mm-hmm. That's what keeps you on your toes, and that's what keeps you off balance.
What really frightened me about Rosemary's Baby was that she felt uncomfortable enough with her husband that she hid the rest of the dessert in her napkin and already seemed afraid of him. And I think that actually, like we've talked about love and horror before, like last year for Valentine's Day with Michael. But
that was so sweet.
It was. But I think that's one reason why like stories we count as romance, like even though maybe we shouldn't, like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, like seem like they work with the gothic elements in those stories so well because like love in the 19th century and marriage was kind of horrific if you were a woman who married a dick dude. And like I think that like Rosemary's Baby proves that that's still true of the 20th century, and there are still movies like Jennifer's Body that like examine like patriarchy and like women in a different way than Rosemary's Baby, like, and how that is still kind of a frightening concept.
Mm-hmm. As you were talking and as Ted was talking, I was thinking about my reaction to a movie like a movie that I really love, like the 2010 Wolfman, starring Anthony Hopkins and Benicio del Toro and Emily Blunt. Do you guys know this movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that movie. Actually, I like that movie. It's a good retake on the story.
Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, like, I love that movie and I love the werewolf scenes in it when he turns into a werewolf and goes crazy, but those are not the scenes that scare me. I find those scenes exciting and interesting and provocative and stimulating and creative juice flowing. But the scenes that scare me are the ones where he's in a mental hospital and being made to believe that his transformations into being a werewolf are just insanity, right? They're just insanity. And you're not 100% sure whether he's actually turning into a werewolf or whether he just thinks he is. And like, those are the scarier moments for me. Those are the ones that I come away with going, oh, that's disturbing.
Okay. So using that, you prompted this idea. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Our film. Cause those are scary situations.
Is it a horror film?
Yeah. I don't know. I might be on the fence on that one.
And I'm just throwing it out there because just when you said the asylum, it made me think of that, because it's that whole idea of being, you have this belief system that no one else can see, that no one else believes, being essentially locked up for the world you believe in.
Yeah.
Well, so it's a genre classification question, and even though like Michael and I have both said, we don't necessarily buy into the idea of genres as a hard concept.
And for the record, neither do I. Yeah,
right.
I mean, you can listen to our episode on genre.
Yeah.
On genre. Yeah. But that said, we have a show to do today, so we're going to do this exercise anyway. And like, I mean, can you classify it? So the one that because there's a couple I was wondering too. And oddly enough, mine stemmed off of what Michael was doing with the wolf as well. But so let's start with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Can you classify it as horror? And I just
probably not. I thought of the discomfort of that situation where these people have lost essentially all control. They have no self. What's the word I'm looking for?
So let me say, I'm disturbed by that. I also see a profound social commentary there. So
absolutely.
Right. So intellectually, I'm stimulated, and there's some warnings there that I need to heed. Right. But I'm not horrified.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I agree with that. Okay.
Okay. So let me do mine then, because I was thinking, and this is why I was surprised the direction Wayne went, because you started off saying, so this just occurred to me based on what you were saying. And it's like, oh, I wonder if he's going to pick the same one that I did. And the one that came to mind while Michael was doing his description for me was The Gray with Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
Which is a movie that tanked. People did not people did not like this movie. I love this movie, and this was during Liam Neeson's Taken Assance, when his career takes off, because he's in Taken, which is a great movie. I wouldn't say a horror movie, but great movie. And, we started doing this string of Liam Neeson movies where Liam Neeson stars as a man with a particular set of skills, and he goes and he saves somebody from, some weird thing. And then he does this movie, I think it's the year after Taken, or maybe 2 years after Taken. And it looks from the trailers like this is going to be Liam Neeson, a man with a particular set of skills, fights a wolf. Maybe a supernatural wolf, maybe not.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep, that's not what that movie's about at all. This movie is a psychological thriller about being stalked. In a lot of ways, it owes more to Deliverance than Taken.
Okay.
And it is who's seen it besides me?
I haven't.
Okay, Michael, have you?
I have not seen it. No.
Okay, so the movie is he's among a bunch of survivors. I think they're in a plane crash, right? They're in Alaska, and they're trying to reach, civilization as they're running through the woods. And then the elements are taking them down, just because they've got no supplies or anything. And there's some wolves tracking them. And it's a survival story, if anything. And you're just afraid of the environment and nature. And you don't even really get to see him fight the wolf. You see a very brief clip of it, but it's basically just the world will kill you because you are nothing but a human being who, is not very durable, compared to the mighty forces that is nature. And I found it horrifying and fascinating. but it's not like it tanked because it wasn't what people thought it was going to be. So
okay, how about this? Is Twister a horror film?
Twister? Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or Sharknado.
I didn't find. I actually found
scary.
I thought Sharknado was a scarier film and probably a better film than Twister.
Oh, really?
Well,
yeah.
I really just derailed this conversation.
Well, no, I
don't want to just leave kind of thing. Because
when you say that, something I thought of prior to us recording, I was thinking about movies that may or may not qualify that sense of unease. And I thought of that whole group of disaster films that were popular in the 70s. It's like Poseidon Adventure. And there's that element of escape and survival, and we're fighting forces of nature here, and there's a tremendous amount of suspense over who will survive. But
see, Poseidon Adventure, I am 100% on board with as a horror movie in a way that, like, I'm not sure I count the modern equivalent. Day After Tomorrow, 2012, the Independence Day movies. But like Poseidon Adventure, and maybe it's just budget, right? Poseidon Adventure, horror movie. Towering Inferno, absolutely horror movie, right? To me, at least. And so then I want to go to Hannah's Twister because, for all intents and purposes, it feels like, the monster, it feels very much like a, tracking a monster kind of movie. It's just that the monster is a tornado. It's something that can happen in real life. And it has all the, I don't find it scary, but it has all the elements that we would normally, substitute that tornado for a Godzilla.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, you are given the impression that it's not just several twisters, but just one twister that keeps coming back to get them, and that there's something personal involved with it, And
or Jaws, it really does. It feels like it, except for it's not scary.
Jaws is a horror film. I think there's no question about that. Whether Jaws is a monster.
It's like Michael Crichton co-wrote Twister, and Michael Crichton is a sci-fi author, most famously probably for Jurassic Park, perhaps Westworld now. And I feel that Jurassic Park, I guess perhaps wouldn't fit in our real category of the day, but it the movie especially has elements of horror to it, like the jump scares and the Velociraptor and just the beats that they hit in order to produce kind of the scares and the chasing. And I love Jurassic Park, and it also has the social commentary because it does try and provide a valence of reality, because Crichton at the time did research into what science said to reasonably produce dinosaurs, maybe if it could possibly happen. And every couple of years someone's here, we're getting closer to Jurassic Park based on these discoveries. Anyway, my point is that Crichton has played with elements of the horror genre.
I think if you count, I like Jaws better than I like Jurassic Park. I like Jurassic Park a lot, but I think if you count Jaws as a horror movie, I think Jurassic Park is absolutely a horror movie.
I would agree with that. I think
conceptually,
the dinosaurs are not natural creatures. They're monsters. They're products of science fiction. It actually makes it a Frankenstein story.
And I was about to say that because in the novel, which everybody should read because it's actually much better at bringing home the themes of unfettered capitalism and the need for the humanities to balance out the sciences, that the film cuts because they want to make John Hammond a Walt Disney World figure, in the sense that Walt Disney World would like him to be portrayed as a figure. Which,
and once again, vote tomorrow.
Sure. Don't forget to vote.
Vote tomorrow to stop that.
Yeah. Yeah. But Walt Disney was an asshole, and John Hammond in the book is an asshole. And there's a scene between him and I believe it's Dr. Wu, maybe more scientists, because the cast is much more expanded in the book. And John Hammond's I want the dinosaurs to be real. That's why you have to make sure that we don't modify them. And the scientist is well, John, they're not real. We're doing the best we can. We've had to plug in things, they aren't in natural existence. This is this is really a Frankenstein kind of thing. And John just doesn't get it.
No, I think I agree with you 100%, Hannah. The book Jurassic Park is much more Frankensteinian, obviously Frankensteinian, or it refers to the Frankenstein novel. But I'm going to argue that the movie refers back to the 1931 James Whale Frankenstein movie. And there are several things. There's a castle, right? There's a lab. There's a storm, and there's a scene where the monster and the creator are looking at each other through machinery. And that also shows up in Blade Runner, which also has a lab and a storm and a castle, So I think that these are there are tropes in the films that indicate that genealogy, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So anyway, everyone should rewatch and reread Jurassic Park is what I'm trying to say.
So if we accept Jurassic Park, that takes us back to your original one, though. Is Twister a horror movie? I'm coming around, and it feels wrong to say yes. It doesn't feel like it is one, and I don't know why I am willing to accept Jurassic Park and not that.
No, in my mind, I think Twister's a stretch on that, but that's also open to interpretation. What scares you doesn't scare me. I mean, that's it. Like, this might be a complete horror movie to you. Because that's just how you are perceiving it.
But lots of horror movies aren't actually scary, right? Like, again, we talked last week, a show that Ted hasn't heard yet because of time travel recording. But but everything Troma made is a horror movie. Not everything, but they made a lot of horror movies that aren't actually scary, right? They're just ridiculous. So, but I think they qualify, right?
Well, was it trying to be horror is one thing, I mean, the Troma films try to be horror and fail miserably, and their failure is part of what is attractive about them, right?
Yes.
I have 3 friends who work for Troma.
But I think Twister, I would go so far as to say that Twister's a monster movie, because I think that the Twisters behave in ways that real Twisters don't behave in that. But I agree with Ted in as far as that if a movie doesn't scare me at all, then it's hard for me to think of it as a horror film, right? Some of these films, like The Invisible Ghost, has no monsters in it whatsoever, and that scares me. That really scares me. Whereas on the other hand, like the Lovecraft Country, where the Topsy ghosts come after Diana. Do you guys see this?
Yeah. I haven't seen this yet. It's on the list.
The Topsy ghosts are the scariest thing that I have fucking seen in the cinema for years.
Yeah, they did a great job. They're definitely way up there.
Yeah, that was a scary series.
Yeah, it's a great series too.
Horrific. I would say horrific.
I want to before I lose it, I want to build on something you just said, Michael, and ask a question. Then, if it's hard to consider something horror if it doesn't scare you at all, I'm going to go in the complete opposite direction. Movies that I find not only not scary, I find them almost offensively boring, are things that I think most people consider horror. The entire Saw franchise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
The Shining. The Shining. Sorry.
Oh no! Come on.
Go back to your point.
Oh, and another old argument rears its ugly head.
Your point.
But no,
I think it's true.
No,
man.
but I find the Saw movies. I have friends who are very into them. I know people who love the Saw movies. I find them, and I get that there's a lot of gore. I get that there is, I guess, some scientific exercise in how exactly can you build a Rube Goldberg machine to pry somebody's chest open? Fine. But I find them so thoroughly uninteresting, not scary, because it's just wall to wall jump scare. So there's no jump scare at all. And it's thoroughly uninteresting to me.
Well, Ted, our mutual friend Bruce, who just loves all of that, just kind of gross out horror kind of stuff. He starts listing his favorite movies, and it's all stuff I have no real inherent interest in. And a lot of it is, it's just that kind of, I see it as extreme violence for the sake of extreme violence.
And that's it. That is extreme violence for nothing more than to be gratuitously violent.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with scaring you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah,
I agree. I think that these films, you're right, Matt, that they want to be horror films, but they're not. They're just fright films. They're just spooky, or not spooky, but jump scares is not horror. Horror is a psychological and aesthetic condition, right? It's not just a spider, right? It's
so. Does it depend, though? To our earlier question, is it? I mean, I said I don't find the book Frankenstein scary in the least, and I love the book, but I understand your point of view on it. So, is this a thing where for the people who are honestly terrified and feel unease with, I mean, maybe we just don't get Saw, right? I think I'm disparaging it because I don't like it, but
they make me feel uneasy. Certainly, I mean, that's part of what I don't like about them. But
I was so bored. I honestly was bored.
Obviously, people want.
Oh, stop it!
I mean, obviously, people want that kind of experience. They want to have the jump scare experience. That's why these movies are popular. I just think that it's not horror because there's no work in it at all. It's just, bleh, it's not.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's just what it is. But there's movies that like make me jump. I don't really consider horror movies, but there's horrific elements in them. But I still don't consider them a horror movie. I mean,
give me an example.
Freaking Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Great movie.
That child catcher scarred me for life. The movie's not scary.
I found the Bumble in Rudolph to be really frightening when I was 4.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh, he's definitely so cute.
He still weirds me out a little.
But I don't know if any of you know this, but we're back at Dinosaur Story. I still can't bring myself to rewatch it because it frightened me as a child. And I know I'm not alone in this because I mentioned it to Josh thinking he'd make fun of me. And he was like, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it is, I mean, that, maybe we should just do an episode on kids shows that are extremely messed up.
Oh my God.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Puffin stuff. That would be a great idea. That show's going to happen. Coming soon. It's let us know in the comments on this episode. Just get started before we even make the call to comments. What are some terrifying kid shows?
I don't want to be on that show.
That's a great topic.
Anyway, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't remember where I was going. I mean, we all I think maybe have some deep visceral reactions to creepy things that aren't meant to be creepy, or they are something maybe Twister has some horror elements in it because the people writing and filming it understand the genre, but it might not be actually scary. So I wonder they might not be as much as we can categorize things into genre, and as useful as that is, I wonder if at a certain point what how much borrowing you can do without you actually officially joining a horror movie. You know what I mean?
And that's one of the problems with genre as a concept is it can very easily lead to cliche. You can follow all the steps of the hero's journey and tell a really dumb story. That's the same with the tropes of horror. You can hit all the beats. You can follow that pattern, that formula, and formulaic. It doesn't always work, but those
Manos,
formulas there because they have. What's that?
Manos, the Hands of Fate. It ought to be a perfect horror film. It's done. It's right out of the textbook on how to write a horror film. Yeah. It's perfect. It's just so bad.
It's bad. Yeah, it's
so
really bad.
Look at a movie like The Wizard of Oz. I mean, that's a freaking horror movie. It starts off all nice and sweet and wholesome. Now you're being stalked. She's constantly being stalked.
I mean, does it start off wholesome? Does it?
What's that?
Does it start off wholesome?
No, she starts off. She starts off as right, but she's as wholesome as Jamie Lee Curtis is in Halloween. I mean,
I said that Jamie Lee Curtis never killed anybody.
It's we gotta. Granted, the farm life's not that great, but she's loved and blah blah blah. I mean, it's wholesome ass. Let me rephrase it.
I'm just being a pain.
She's bored with her surroundings, but it's not.
Right. Oh no, I'm referring to the fact that she literally kills someone 10 minutes in.
Well, that was an accident. She just happened to be in the house,
and her neighbor is a creep who looks like the witch who's after her dog. She wants to kill her dog, guys.
Yes, and yet that's also a reflection of herself. I mean, Glinda asks her this first question that Glinda says to her is, "Are you a good witch or a bad witch?" And she doesn't understand the question. She says, "I'm not a witch at all," which is wrong. She's totally a witch and a killer of witches.
Is Dorothy Cinema's first final girl? Is Dorothy Cinema's first final girl? I just never thought about it before just now.
I really just derailed this conversation. I'm so sorry, Ted.
No, I think this is fascinating.
On this show, derailed what?
There are no rails on this show.
Oh, that might explain a lot.
Yeah, that would explain a lot.
So are there any other ones? Are there any other weird, is this horror, I mean, the very exercise that we're doing that, Wayne started the show on, things that, how do you count this as horror? Because
that's the problem with genre,
count Deliverance.
I mean,
that's the problem with genre. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with genre is that we keep getting trapped in this notion that we're trying to define a genre when actually it's really personal. As Ted was pointing out, I saw The Howling when I was like 14, which was probably too young to see it. It really scared me. And now I watch it and I'm still really fucking scared by The Howling, even though if I saw it for the first time today, I'd be like, wow, what a cool movie,
Yeah.
It
that's I think a lot of that stuff. That stuff gets injected.
Yeah,
it gets injected into us when we're really little. It's funny. I would never, until this moment, thought to qualify Wizard of Oz as a horror film, but it scared the bejesus out of me when I was 5.
Yeah, Flying monkeys. It turns real dark.
It does. And the guy says, "Go kill my political enemy." Right? I mean, it's nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they go to the haunted forest and then they burn the scarecrow, right? And he's like, it doesn't hurt. And I'm like, ah!
Oh yeah, there's a ton of and they burn them, they tear them apart. There's a lot of body horror in that movie.
First they took my left leg and they threw it over there. Then they took my right leg and they threw it over there. Well, that's you all over.
I'm telling you, kids films,
Wayne.
What was that?
Great line.
Kids films, like they're messed up. Like all of it's messed up. Like don't pretend like you're shielding kids from stuff.
Yeah,
it's all there.
Just let them watch porn. They'll be better off.
Okay, that's not. I want to go on the record and say that is not my argument.
That's an argument from Hannah Rogers, PhD.
I will be editing this episode, so.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
That's scary. And so we've resolved nothing.
We've resolved that we should get a nicer editor.
I think it's interesting that we keep coming back to this point, or at least I do, about genre and how genre is no good, and then we immediately ask ourselves, so what is horror really?
You're right. Yeah.
I find myself getting trapped in that.
Well, Michael, I have read some Plato today, so I was feeling very philosophical. Svetsyn Todorov, who's like super into like genre. Basically he was like, okay, here are the rules of detective fiction. It has to fit in like these categories. Here are the rules of like the suspense story. It needs to fit in these categories. And then he says that like, basically, and I'm sorry, Todorov, who I share a birthday with, if I misquote you, but he's basically like, well, whenever it deviates from the genre, that's when art forms and like new things appear. So like, part of following genre argument is following the rules, which like I'm not saying I agree with him, though we share a birthday. It's a weird thing to know. But I do think that like that's part of the reason, like that kind of thinking is part of the reason why we keep going back and forth, because we've been taught like, here are these rules and this is what makes this and that. But then like something new appears and we don't know how to categorize it. And
see, I don't have the problem with genre. I mean, I'm not casting blame on you guys, but like,
no, we have a problem. We have a problem. Yeah.
I don't look at anything in the genre. I just I literally look at things as movies.
Yeah. Sure. Is this a good story?
And it really is a good or a bad movie. Did this entertain me? Then it was a good movie. Did this not entertain me? No, it was a bad movie. It wasn't. I don't care if it's Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can or freaking Deadpool. I don't care as long as it's a good or a movie. I don't go, it would have been great if it wasn't a superhero movie. I don't look at it as a superhero movie. I look at it as a movie.
Yeah, but I think that let's say sometimes the reason why a movie is good or bad is because of things like, is its tone consistent throughout, or is it a gigantic mess? I'm still talking about Rebecca for the record. And so like sometimes like movies can definitely cross genre boundaries. Like we've talked about many of them these past 2 episodes, and they can be totally well done. They're just good movies, and that's that. But also, if a movie just is poorly written and you don't have a correct tone, and 1 minute it's trying to be a great sweeping romance, and then like suddenly without any setup, there's someone going mad in a mirrored room for some reason. And then there's like, and then there's a scene of someone having a breakdown as they drink and smoke, because those are bad things to signal bad women. But like simultaneously, there's like a very saccharine speech about like the power of love. It's like, what? it.
And then a twister shows up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there was no twister to end my misery.
It's a twister.
That's right. There's a twister in Wizard of Oz too. Oh my God!
Yeah. How did I not have the foresight to load? It's a twister up on my soundboard on the horror episode? Obviously, I should have known that was coming up.
I want to go back to Hannah's point. If we still have a few minutes.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that's a very interesting point, Hannah, that the genres set up these conventions by which we understand things, right? And so we go into a movie with certain expectations. If it's been billed as a horror movie, then we go into it with certain expectations. And part of what determines whether we think it's a good movie or not is how well it fulfills those expectations, right? But if it can challenge those expectations in a new way that's exciting and or interesting or entertaining, as Ted points out, if it busts those boundaries in a way that makes me rethink the boundaries, then that's a really good movie, right? That's a movie for the ages, right?
Yeah, and I just worked on a series in Richmond last summer in fall, and it's on Showtime right now, called The Good Lord Bird, based on a James McBride novel about John Brown the abolitionist. Oh. Now we're talking about abolitionists, slavery, 1850s, pre-Civil War, basically the spark to hit the Civil War. You're talking about atrocities, mankind has brought on people, and it's a freaking funny movie.
It's really funny, yeah.
You know what I mean? You're walking into it, and if you go in and go, okay, well, this is a borderline Western about slavery, the pre-Civil War, it's going to be gritty, it's going to be blah, 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 and you're like, okay, that's what it's going to be, and then all of a sudden you start watching it going, why am I laughing at this?
Ethan Hawke is so over the top. He's wonderful.
And I like that. I like that surprise when it doesn't adhere to, again, the genre. It's like, okay, there's no real set rules that say it can't be funny and serious.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot. I do like, I don't like when they're overtly like, you got like a movie like Zombieland where it's trying to be both. I mean, it's very obvious. Shaun of the Dead. They're trying to be both. They're trying to do comedy and horror. And it works. It works for them. But I like it when it's not expected. I like it when it's like okay, we don't know what we are. Just come and watch our movie.
Yeah. Yes. I think that maybe like the biggest surprise of this kind of flip is the end of Get Out. People really loved the ending because it flipped what our expectations on its head.
Yeah.
But it did it. The reason why it's successful in a flip is because the movie understands the expectations and understands how to play with them, as opposed to I think that you have to understand certain expectations when you're creating art. I say, as someone who hasn't published anything that is creative in a while. But I think the way things work, you have to understand certain expectations in genres before you can flip them. Otherwise, you're just making a mess, Rebecca filmmakers. Anyway, I'm sorry. You shouldn't let me watch TV before.
Well, and this might be us essentially booking another episode, because I actually do when you guys were talking, and Michael, you even said, you get the art when you deviate from the genre in interesting ways. And I think a big part of that has to do with, balancing the audience expectations against your deviation and what you're trying to say as to, and it's guesswork, right? Whether it's going to be successful or not, because the one that I mentioned The Gray, which is completely mismarketed, right? As this, it's a horror movie. It's a psychological horror movie that made itself look like it was going to be an action flick. And the one that I can think of that is the exact opposite is Darren Aronofsky's Mother from a couple of years ago, which was marketed entirely as, hi, we're going to show you this deep psychological horror for starring Jennifer Lawrence. And then it's just this weird. It's a weird movie that is Darren Aronofsky's view on religion and God, and nobody got it, and everybody hated it because no one knew what they were getting when they were going in there. Actually, a really interesting movie, but it was marketed to the entirely the wrong audience. It is a horror movie. It uses all the horror conventions, but this is not the movie anybody signed up for. And I think maybe that's an episode in and of itself, talking about the ways in which we play with genre and market to people. But
I think that would be really interesting.
But I think that's another conversation. Yeah. Anyway, I would like to thank our guests for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Ted, this is your first time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more or see what you're going to be in or anything like that?
Instagram, Twitter. Well, Twitter's more political. Don't go to Twitter unless you want to be offended. I think you guys won't, but
we'll link you in the show notes.
Yeah, but usually, I don't know. I'm not really good at self-promotion. Hey, I was in this. Go check it out. Sometimes I forget what I'm in.
Yeah.
And,
we'll link your IMDb listing as well.
There you go.
I mean, I was filming last year, and somebody goes, I just saw you on, how was that? The Blacklist. I go, oh yeah, I forgot I get the Blacklist.
Okay, Ted, real quickly, here's my favorite anecdote of just spotting you at random. Is an episode of Mindhunter.
Oh, I sitting at the bar.
Yeah, and just it's a scene and Ted sitting at a bar in Pittsburgh. He's like, that's Ted. I've seen him sitting at that bar.
Yeah, they're like, hey, I was shooting Outsiders at the time, and they're like, we need some guys that look like, a new long hair guy, blah, 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 sitting in a bar. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything tomorrow. Sure, I'll do background on Mindhunter. Why not?
But just it cracked me up. It's like, yes, I've seen you at many bars in Pittsburgh.
This is a very natural thing for me to do. I'm just sitting in a
bar. What about you, Michael? You're sitting in any bars?
No, I don't sit in bars anymore. I had to give it up. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousPhD, but if you do, you'll find it a singularly unrewarding experience because I almost never text there. I am the director of an enterprise called the Center for Monster Studies at the University of California at Santa Cruz, and we don't have a website yet. We're brand new, but as soon as we do, I'll list it in the show notes.
Probably on a future episode.
Yeah. I hope you still invite me back again.
Oh, you'll just be here. We'll be talking about we'll be talking about romantic comedies or something, and all of a sudden you'll just start talking. It's like, how the hell? How long has he been here? That's how it works with Michael.
I never leave. I can't find that screen door I wandered in. Where is this place?
That sounds like a horror film. You can find me here, assuming that this is not the last time we ever record because the world's imploded. And I guess you can follow me on Twitter at Hanley Rogers, but that's, an experience that is empty. What? I don't tweet anymore. I don't like social media. I don't like going on there. It's a waste of time.
It's very bad for you.
It makes me anxious. Yes, it is bad for you.
Please retweet episodes of the show. Do not listen to them. Tweeting's very important. Social media, forward the show. Make sure everybody loves us. Anyway, Wayne, tell us how you don't use social media.
Here mostly these days. So.
I hate you all.
If I ever write another blog or something, I'll let you know.
Matt is singularly promoting our show on social media because the rest of us just can't.
It's exhausting.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, go vote tomorrow. Make the world better. And once you vote, or before you vote and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's very important.
Vote for us.
Yeah, vote for us. Leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Write a little review. That helps people find the show. Makes us more popular. It gives us something to do. Gives me something to live for. Especially if things don't go our way tomorrow. I'm going to really need uplifting messages about how wonderful this little enterprise is. So leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever the hell you listen to podcasts from. Oh, and YouTube. I forgot to mention YouTube last week.
We're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. I'm an optimist.
So subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is actually doing better lately, but we still need more subscribers in order to help us reach platforms to unlock features because YouTube is fucking weird and I don't understand it, but whatever. You can follow me personally on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, all the places at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show at Vox Popcast, all of the places on all the social medias as well. I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you at home for listening. I'd like to thank you at home for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Mister, my family will pay cash. Whatever ransom you're asking for, they'll pay it.
It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yes, you will, precious. You will get the hose.